So I want to begin with the question of, where is your consciousness right now? The definition of consciousness is the state of being aware and awake of one's surroundings. The state of being aware and awake to one's surroundings. So my invitation for this week and for our entire month is for us to become more and more heightenedly aware, awake and aware of where our consciousness is moment to moment. And noticing that it shifts. An obvious way it shifts is when we go to sleep. That's very different. Our surroundings are very different. That's a very different state of consciousness. The dream sleep, the deep dreamless sleep. Waking states, if you're meditating or praying, you can shift states. A conversation can shift your state. Being alone can shift your state. So the invitation is for all of us as collectively, because there's a power in the collective intention, as well as individually, to become heightenedly aware of our conscious state. This month we're going to be talking about universal truth principles, which is what Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living, articulated very well, and he created this symbol. I'll get to that in a minute. We're also going to be touching on Reverend Michael Beckwith's 4 stages of consciousness, which are slightly different. In the past, I've given an entire 4 weeks just to that. I'm not going to go in as much detail, but we will be touching on that, how it interacts with this. And we'll be talking about making an agreement or a covenant with the divine presence within you, and how that interacts with all of this. So we're going to be doing all of it every week, building on the week before, and it's just going to be amazing by the 4th Sunday of January. Light's going to be beaming out of this place. So this beautiful symbol that Ernest Holmes created, he was someone who studied a lot of world's religions, philosophies, science, and he was an integrator. There's people on our planet Earth who I would say that's their soul group. They like to integrate things. Our reading this morning was by Ken Wilber. I think he's another integrator. Maybe many of you are integrators. You try a lot of different things, and you start integrating them in a way that makes sense to you. So Ernest Holmes took this created this symbol, and it primarily is inspired by Hinduism, because Hinduism came first for the world's religions, but you can find all the world's religions on here as well. His favorite Hindu author was Sri Aurobindo. In fact, he had the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo's tome. It's over 1,000 pages. And then when you read it, so many times as I'm reading it, he had it on his nightstand when he died. As you're reading it, I keep putting science and mind symbols all along, like, this is exactly, you can see the connection of what Sri Aurobindo was saying and what Ernest Holmes was talking about. So for those of you who've already know this symbol, I just invite you to maybe be open to an expanded state, not new state, but an expanded state of understanding the symbol. And for those of you who are new, I hope you get as much joy out of it as many of us do. To begin with, I want to say that the colors are actually an artistic representation. They don't have meaning in this particular symbol. Artists do recreate the symbol in many different ways. So the essential parts of the symbol are the circle, the 2 lines, and the V. Today we're going to talk primarily about the circle, and then next week we'll talk about the top, middle, bottom, the following Sundays. But I want to give it a quick expression of what articulation of what these 3 states are. The whole thing is the creative process. Ernest Holmes was talking about the creative process, but it's also states of consciousness, that every one of us has 3 bodies. So we have a causal body, a subtle energy body, and a physical body. And so each of these elements are depicted in this chart. So right now, in this moment, you have 3 bodies. And we want us to understand that, to realize this isn't something far away. One of the intentions that I have for not just this month, but for our community collectively is to move away from the idea that these states are hard to attain. That they're right here, they're available to us, and when we learn certain techniques, we can access them because they're part of who we are. They always have been part of who we are, always will be part of who we are. And so anytime we have a moment of touching into it, my experiences, and perhaps many of your experiences, the moment we touch into it, it doesn't feel like that's crazy. It's like, oh, of course, this is part of who I am. So we want this all to become far more natural to us, and that's what spiritual awakening is about. The circle itself is the ground of all being. It's pure existence. This is all part of the creative process. This is beyond creative process. So you know what often in our prayers we say the divine presence is in, through, and as all creation and yet transcends all creation? This ground of all being, this isness, it doesn't come, it doesn't go, it's birthless, it's deathless, it simply is. It is behind everything that is unfolding. It's behind all three bodies. One of the ways that help me really grasp sort of symbolically of what this is like is a movie screen. A movie screen is blank. It's emptiness. Often you hear emptiness, the void in Buddhism. And everything unfolds within it. So on the movie screen, any story can be played. And it doesn't matter what the story is. It can be the most horrible story. That movie screen is still going to be the movie screen. It is untouched. That can be the best story in the world. It doesn't matter. That movie screen, that beingness is untouched. It never is moved by what is happening in this creative process. It is in the process. It is fully in the causal realm. It is fully in the subtle realm. It is fully in the physical realm, but it is never absorbed or limited by any of these bodies. The only place for me that the movie screen analogy doesn't work is it's sort of an inert presence. Even when we say it's just an isness, that's nice, but it feels a little cold. What we discover is that this beingness is pure bliss. So it's imagining the movie screen, but the movie screen is just alive as pure bliss. And it is a bliss that nothing could ever touch within the creative process. So the moment we start opening up to that natural state, we start to feel a bliss that we can't even explain. Does that make sense to you? It's ever present all the time. Nothing in this world. We have dramatic things happening in our world right now. It's very interesting to the whole creation of the evolution of who we are in time and space and form. But the ever-present existence never is touched by it. It just stays blissful. Now, one of the things that I really love in the reading today is that this state is a little, for me anyways, and reading other people, I want to say that I hope you do the same too. When we have experiences, we start connecting with other people who've had similar experiences and reading about what other people have said about it. So it's been my experience, and I read it's not just my experience, that's why they've come up with this map, because collectively over thousands of years, we begin to understand these things. This state is so natural to us that often we don't even recognize that it's happened. So if we look at these states as like sleep, so this is like the dream state when you're dreaming. By the way, I just want to, just as a sidebar, one of our intentions for this space, we're going to be painting soon, is to create a symbol. We're looking at maybe making a little stained glass here of our symbol. Anyone who's an artist wants to give us some ideas, that would be great. But one of the things I was thinking is it would be far more accurate to make it not a circle but a heart. First of all, because the ground of all being is bliss and love. But also the physical is not equal to the subtle. The physical world is much smaller than the subtle world. Think about your dream life. Your dream life, you have much more possibilities. You can move around in so much greater freedom. And then the causal realm, which is the ideas, has no form at all. That's even vaster. So the physical world is just a little point. And that's a good thing to remember as we're on this spiritual journey, that in fact this physical identity that we tend to spend most of our time in is still very small, and we want to open up in love to all this expansive state. Okay, I got sidetracked. So these states, when you go into a dreamless state, that's a very different experience than your physical, when you're in your self, in your normal waking state. Causal is the deep dreamless sleep, and we can, some of you have talked about it, we can be conscious during our deep dreamless sleep, but that's still a different state than the subtle and the physical. The interesting thing about the non-dual state is you don't have the experience of shifting into a vastly different experience. You don't have this while, like this, sometimes people see lights and everything's one, or you have these amazing things. It's nothing like that. For me, the experience has been just a shift into pure joy. Everything stays exactly the same. I'm still me. So, for instance, I was reading The One Taste one time, lying on my couch, totally relaxed, and he was saying in the reading, I wasn't trying to attain anything, I was just reading the book, and he's doing what is called the pointing out instructions. And as I'm reading it, the shift happens, but it's so subtle because everything's the same. I'm still me, I'm still reading the book. I'm not in a different state of consciousness. I'm exactly where I was, but suddenly I am just experiencing pure joy. Not Harriet experiencing joy, just joy itself. Because what we discover is when we start moving into that state, that small identity starts to dissolve and it's just joy. It's just, like right now, you're listening to me, but the non-dual state is just listening, just talking, just chairs, floor, ceiling. There's no identity, there's no centeredness to say it begins here. It's everywhere. We are everything. So the shift is still, I experience myself, but the self has suddenly become vast. So I went for a walk, and just this joy, my experience was everything was joy, nothing was different, nothing had happened, but just pure joy and this giggle. There was just this constant giggle in my heart, just like it was a pure bliss. And that's, to me, what this state is. And it's available to us all the time. And we can experience it in dreaming. So for many people, you do dream work, and then we start doing dream work. You start doing what we call lucid dreaming, where you wake up within the dream, and you can change the dream, the images, and that's not what this is. When you wake up in the non-dual state, remember the non-dual state's at all levels. If you wake up in the non-dual state, within the dream state, the experience is the entire dream is happening inside of you. So when I've experienced it, it's exactly what I was talking about the movie screen, which is probably why I like that analogy, except I felt it inside my body. The entire cosmos was a story in myself, and I didn't have any desire to change it, to fix it, to make it different than what it was. I just delighted in the story itself, and at the same time, I was completely free of any identity with it. It was me, and yet I absolutely transcended it. So what spiritual teachers teach us is the more we start tapping into this already natural essence of our beingness, we become, in those moments, totally free. And those moments of freedom lead to great creativity, allows this to flow a lot easier because we're less attached. So how do we connect with this non-dual state? I'm going to give you some practices you may know of your own. I'm just going to share the ones that have come up for me. There is the pointing out instructions, as I was saying, I was reading. If you Google pointing out instructions, there will be videos, there will be reading. My suggestion is to be completely relaxed. Listen to the videos, do the reading. Don't try to attain anything. Don't try to get something. Just let the words point out reality to you. And my experience is the more you just let the point out reality, you'll suddenly have that shift. It's amazing how powerful it is. Ramana Maharshi talks about who am I, the who am I inquiry. If you spend 1 month asking who am I all day long throughout the day, you will start finding different layers, and you will start waking up to the I am that is here. It's not the I am of the I of the physical self, but the I am. 1 month, all day long. Who am I? Who am I really? Oh, I just burned my finger on the stove. Whose finger was burned on the stove? I have a desire. Whose desire is this? Who am I? Who am I really? Who's having this emotional reaction? Just continue to stay in that inquiry of who am I, and all these three bodies start to dissipate, and we break free into this I amness. I find Zen meditation gets me to the state pretty quickly. Zen meditation is the simplest type of meditation, so like anything, like this whole thing is just so simple we don't believe it's real. All we do in Zen is you sit quietly, You stare with open eyes, but soft open eyes. You pick a spot on the floor or the wall. Your eyes are sort of looking down. And there's the idea of non-dual. There's no inner, there's no outer. You're not closing your eyes. You're not shutting out your senses. There's a lot of, we'll go through those practices later in future weeks. But this is just allowing everything to arise, but you're just counting. All you do is count your breaths to 10. And if you get distracted on the way to 10, you go back to 1, and you start all over again. And you just keep doing that. If you go to 20, you go, oh, just go back to 1. Start all over again. And that's all you do. And for the life of me, I could not figure out why I always start giggling at the end of it. I just feel such joy. Because what's happened is I haven't been focusing on myself. I haven't been focusing on, a lot of times a mantra can be something you want to manifest or something that you personally identify. We have no personal identification with numbers. There's just this total concentration of letting everything go, which is what it's doing. It's letting everything go and letting everything be just as it is. Zen is big. It's just as it is. You're just sitting. You're just standing. You're brushing your teeth. Everything is just as it is. So when you go to the Zen Center in downtown San Francisco, it's in the middle of a city. You hear fire engines. It's loud, and they're meditating away. And I was used to, you want to go to a retreat. You want to go where it's quiet, as least sensory stimuli as possible. But in Zen, everything is arising inside the consciousness of the I Am. It doesn't determine us. It's inside of us. So it just becomes part of the meditation. Everything happening is part of the meditation. It just is. We just stand in the isness of it. It's an incredibly powerful practice. And then the power is the freedom. Because generally, when we hear a noise, then we start making associations with it. That's why so many meditation teachers say, cut out the sensory, because it gets our mind going. I hear a fire engine, oh, somebody hurt. Oh, I hear someone talking over there. What do they say? We just start listening to what they're saying, or we're thinking about our grocery list, or we have all these things that start to engage us and pull our attention away. But the more we can keep our attention focused on one thing, all those things start to dissipate of themselves. Their power over our awareness. Consciousness is what are we awake and aware to of our surroundings. If we can be free within a very active surroundings and just stay focused on one thing, we find we start hitting that natural bliss that's always there, that's here right now. This natural bliss is right in this moment. And we start to connect with it because our mind isn't going in a million different directions. Judgment is a big one that keeps us, attachments and resistances. You see that everywhere on these meditation practices. And then so that's a wonderful practice. And another one is transcendental meditation. That was my first practice. It was interesting there. It's basically a mantra, but it's a mantra that is free of identity. So they give you a sound. For me, it was shirring. I'm not supposed to tell anyone. You now know a big secret. And the teaching wasn't difficult, but it was very adamant. 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. Period. No question. You will not get the benefit, what they say, is unless you do. And all you do, again, follow the breath, say the mantra. Again, it starts cutting out the noise. Jerry Seinfeld, I just saw a video recently, I don't know if some of you have seen it, where he's talking to a bunch of people about how he's been doing TM for 30 or 40 years. And he said it's what's kept him going creatively all these years, how he was able to handle such a busy schedule, that just reconnection with his conscious self, which is there. It's very natural. It's not hard to touch. It's just getting quiet, stilling ourselves to not be our attention dissipated, and suddenly our natural self just is there. And it's joy, and it's pure, unlimited joy. Commit to that 20 minutes a day, in the morning and the night, and you'll find incredible benefits. That's what TM continues to offer. That's what all these meditations practice is. Even if you're not doing it all day long, just for a brief moment, that touching of your eternal self will impact you the rest of your day. When I've taught meditation classes, the amount of people that have said, oh my gosh, I can tell now when I don't meditate. I can feel it in my day. I can feel the sluggishness, that things don't feel the same. I feel a little bit out of alignment. But the moment I touch this effortless, natural essence of my being, suddenly I'm back in the flow. Shunryu Suzuki says, when we're doing it every day, we don't realize the power until we stop. And then we realize how powerful this practice is, because it's so natural. Our essence is natural. Now, I want to shift to Reverend Michael's 4 stages of consciousness. Now, Reverend Michael's stage of consciousness is about us, down here. The 4 stages of consciousness we go. So today we're going to start with the victim state of consciousness, which obviously is the lowest state of consciousness. Now, the victim state of consciousness, first of all, I think sometimes when we say a victim state of consciousness, we think of it as pervasive. My experience is most people feel very empowered and masterful of some areas of their life, and in other areas we feel like a victim. We can feel like a victim. And what that means is we feel like we can't control what's happening to us. It's my family, it's my genetics, it's my education level, it's systemic. We know we are seeing how unfair the world is systemically for people who are different. We have a lot happening in our world politically right now. I have no control over that. I feel like a victim. I can't feel peaceful when I know these horrible things are happening. I was listening to a professor at the California Integral Institute, and he was saying, and I just love this, he works with people who've gone through trauma, and he said, and he's explaining all different types of trauma. So it's not, we tend to think he was going through all the different types of trauma. And he said, ultimately, the greatest pain of a trauma, the greatest continuing tragedy of a trauma is when it disconnects us from our essential self. That we can heal when we reconnect with our essential self, but the trauma pushes us away from that essential self. So if we want to shift from a victim state of consciousness in any area of our life, so again, you're masterful in some, but there might be an area where you're not feeling very masterful, where you feel the world is more powerful than you, or circumstances or habits or family is more powerful than you. In those moments, what that is telling us is to reconnect with our essential self, which is everywhere all of the time. Does that make sense? Connecting with our essential self. So we want to, when we recognize places where we feel powerless or helpless, the first step we want to do is connect with our essential self. And so this brings me to the covenant. Now, I love the word covenant because it, to me, it has richness and depth, but I also know it has a religiosity that may not appeal to many of you. So you can just use agreement. Carolyn Mace used sacred contract. Whatever languaging feeds your soul. I like the word, I'm going to use covenant just because it's how I live my life, so it comes easily. It's a commitment between yourself, your physical self, and the rest of you. It's saying, I am committed to waking up, becoming conscious to all aspects of my being, my natural essence, my subtle body, and my causal body. I make that commitment, and I make that commitment every single day as much as I can. Now, many of you may have had meditation practices and then moved away from it. That happens all the time. We come back to them. Those of you who have a meditation practice now, it's just a recommitting because it's so easy to fall away from a meditation practice. It's so easy for our physical self to feel like it's not doing anything. So the commitment is, and we offer things here in our community to inspire you to do your inner work, but there's nothing more important than making your own individual commitment that you can do as much as you can every day. It's that consistency of doing it day in and day out that really starts to make a difference. So the covenant, we're going to go through different aspects of the covenant all month long. And then in February, we're going to begin a covenant group for anyone who's interested on Wednesday afternoon, 1:30, 3:30, or Wednesday evening, 7 to 9 p.m. It's going to be once a month, the first Wednesday of every month, and we're just going to come together and collectively talk about our experience of living the covenant. And that's, even if you've done it before, for me, it's a way of life. So it's nice to be with other people who are committed to your spiritual practices, talk about the places where you're having challenges, the places where you're having successes, how it's working in your life, inspire one another, because everyone's practices are a little different. So the first thing is spirit, God first. What is your meditation practice going to be? Commit to that this week. If you don't have a meditation practice, just pick one. Pick a mantra. do I am. Ramana Maharshi says, who am I is much more effective, but you can do a mantra of I am, very simple. You can do who am I. Just do who am I all day long. Make that your meditation practice. Try Zen meditation. Try the pointing out instructions. Make a commitment, because that daily practice makes a difference. I started a covenant living this way back in 1992, so I've been doing it for almost 30 years. And I wanted to at one point, so I do it, I was always fairly consistent, but there's always times where I went off and on. And then finally I just said, I wonder what it would be like if I kept my covenant and didn't miss a day. I just wanted to explore, see what that was like. And that was in 2013, and I just couldn't do it. I would always end up within a month or two missing a day or two. There was always seems to be a very good reason. And so by and I kept trying. I rewrote the covenant like a million times because I wanted it to do it perfectly. And then in 2015, I said, I think it's too short. I got to do it for 5 years. So, even though I never was as successful at 1 year, somehow I thought 5 years would be easier. So I did it, and so I'm in the last year of my 5-year covenant, and I've kept it. And it's amazing, the extraordinary power of consistently doing spiritual practices, how we perceive ourselves differently. And because it's every day, as Shunryu Suzuki says, we can't totally see it. He was giving an example of a Zen monastery, and he had spent time in the Zen monastery, and he said, when you're in it, you don't think it's anything special. He said, but now, when I'm out in the world and I go visit a Zen monastery, I start crying, and I feel the energy and the power because I'm not in it all the time. But when you're in it all the time, it starts to feel very natural. So this last year has been very powerful for me. It started off with an aneurysm. Woohoo! You too can have an aneurysm. No, but it was a great experience, and the reason why it was a great experience, I believe, I don't know, but I believe with all my heart, it's because I've been so committed to my spiritual practices, I was able to move into my subtle body and my causal body very freely and naturally. It wasn't a struggle, it wasn't hard, it was nothing but beautiful and wonderful, and from that helped me answer a lot of other questions that I was having, and then I came back, and when I started the 5-year covenant, I hadn't thought about it, but suddenly it's time to get ordained, and things are happening this 5th year as I've set that commitment, that when we make a commitment to Spirit, things start moving, and we stick to it, and we live it every single day. We say yes to Spirit, Spirit says yes to us right back, and things start moving and happening. So my invitation to all of us is to commit to your awakening, to commit to your spiritual awakening. And I'm not saying you haven't been committed up until now. My invitation is if you've been committed up until now, is there an area of growth for you? Is there an area where you can expand? Because it sure is an amazing being who can move into your subtle body pretty effortlessly, move into your causal body pretty effortlessly, and live from the non-dual state. You are a complete enlightened master if you can do that. So if we have any of those people here, I would like to invite you to come speak some Sunday. But as I think we're all a little bit on the road at different places, I'm inviting us to expand and deepen in our spiritual practice. There's so much happening in this physical world right now, right? Very intense time. We can all feel it. You have to be living under a rock not to be feeling what's happening in our world. The pain is becoming closer and closer to the surface. If we're not doing our spiritual practices, if we're not waking up to these higher states which are full of wisdom, full of creativity, full of possibilities that we have never before imagined, we're missing the opportunity. There's an incredible opportunity available to us this year if we choose to accept it. Do you choose to accept it? Yeah. Nice. So to this week, we are committing to being conscious of our surroundings, committing to our spiritual practices, especially meditation and prayer. There is no substitute for meditation and prayer because they take us to higher states. And we welcome every aspect of our life and accept it. It just is. That gets us to here. It just is. So as things arise all week long, our minds go, it should be this. I can fix it that way. What if I did this? Let a part of you just say, it just is. It just is bliss right now, just as it is. Right? Bliss. Let's pray. Me and the symbol will pray together. And how grateful I am that we always begin our prayers from the awareness that there is only one life, one love, one joy, one peace, one harmony, one presence, one power. It is infinite bliss. It is fully alive and awake as all creation, as every grain of sand of all the billions and billions of galaxies and stars. It is everything that we are, right here and right now in this moment. Collectively, we are this consciousness of pure, absolute oneness where there is no other. There is no separation. There is nothing to fix. There is nothing to make happen. There is nothing to be different. Everything just as it is in this moment is pure bliss. And we open our hearts and our minds and our souls and our body to fully experience the perfection of this moment. We allow that perfection to pervade our awareness. We allow that perfection to pervade our awareness. We allow that perfection to pervade our awareness. And what we begin to recognize as we allow this infinite bliss to pervade our awareness, things effortlessly align themselves. Things start to move within us for the highest good of our life and all those who touch us. Healing starts to happen. Healing, the revelation of pure spirit, begins to happen in our souls, in our minds, in our hearts, and in our bodies. As we touch the ground of all being, we suddenly become in alignment with our highest possibility and our highest good, the creative flow of energy, the divine ideas that animate and awaken us, the beautiful life that we live on earth. All of it moves in alignment with this conscious bliss that is our very life. And as we know this for our life right here in this room, we know this for all life in this entire planet, for our friends, our family, our community, our work life. We know it for our country. We know it for the dynamics of this global world that's unfolding before our eyes. Pure cosmic bliss. Nothing can ever limit this bliss. Nothing can ever limit this love. Nothing can ever limit this peace, ever. And so we start from this place every day in our life. And from this place, we begin to be literal lighthouses in this beautiful earth of ours. We become heaven on earth. We are that now. We are that for all beings and all people. For those people who feel voiceless, who feel invisible, who feel because of their circumstances, they are experiencing so much suffering that there is a helplessness. They don't know spiritual tools right now. They are in pain. The separation that they feel feels not only real, but endless. For those people, we surround them in the love and the light that is their true reality. We activate this conscious love in their awareness that those circumstances and conditions are revealing to them the power that is at the center of their being, to allow new life, new possibilities to be birthed in all beings of this planet, that every person has this divine essence. And so we hold this for all those people who have forgotten and do not know. Right where they are, the divine presence is. And we continue to hold this spacious consciousness for all the planet all week long as leaders of light, here and now. in deep and abiding gratitude for this consciousness that is alive and awake now and forever, I say thank you, thank you, thank you, infinite and eternal one. In deep abiding gratitude, I release this word into the energy and power of love, knowing that as it has been spoken and accepted, it is done. And we say together, and so it is. Amen and amen.
And so it is. And so it is. And so it is. Amen. 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 And so it is. Amen.